Welcome to the Lessons from Leaders podcast. I'm your host, Brian Beckham. My next guest is the head pastor at a 7,000 member strong Methodist church in Houston, Texas called Chapelwood Methodist Church. The Reverend Dr. John Stevens became the head pastor at Chapelwood Methodist Church 6 years ago. In the podcast, John and I talk about spirituality during difficult times. John talks about how it is as a pastor, he deals with the tragedies that he sees on a daily basis. He talks about why it's important to prioritize funerals and our reopening and regathering, or as he puts it. And we talk about how using spirituality, we can all be a little kinder and maybe a little nicer to each other. How can we, in particular, can be nicer on social media and on the internet. And John gives his thoughts on how, as spiritual or religious people, we can get through these very, very difficult times. And now I give you the Reverend Dr. John Stevens. Hey, everybody. Brian Beckham here, VB Attorneys. I've got the Reverend Dr. John Stevens. And John and I were just talking right before the podcast. And John's a friend of mine. And I've been thinking about 4 or 5 days whether I refer to John as Pastor, Reverend, Dr. John, or some other title. And John said it was okay if I referred to him as John. So, John, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing.
Are you all working at home, or are you working? You working at home, or are you working in the office?
I'm actually in a creek. By my son's sitting in the background right there. If you can see, I'm up in Beaver Creek. now I'm in my home office. Been working from my home office for basically 2 months now. As I discussed in the introduction, you're in charge of a big church. I looked up the numbers. I think there's 7,000 members right now.
Yeah, I think we're a little over 7,000 members. Multi-site, multi-campus church, multi-racially diverse. You know, our upper room campus in the Heights is a very diverse. Mercy Street on Saturday night, recovery and addiction, and just people who don't connect to traditional types of church. And then we've merged with a campus on Gessner Road that was an older, more traditional church. But that actually campus is exciting because they already had a food pantry that's been in place for 40, 50 years in Spring Branch. And when we merged, we never really thought about it, but it's become one of the premier outposts for food distributions with the Houston Food Bank. Through all of this, we've been serving on average 350 to 400 families a day. We're over 50,000 individuals now that have been served food from that food pantry there. So we got a lot of volunteers from the church and the community that are working on that. It's pretty inspiring to see that work happening, and the massive amount of need because you've had people that haven't been working.
Yeah, John. And so you're the senior pastor at Chapelwood Methodist Church in Houston, Texas. For a lot of people in Houston know who you are, Houston and beyond. But for people who don't know who you are, John, and I definitely want to talk about what you and the church body are doing, and not just the Methodist Church, but all the religious denominations that you're aware of, what they're doing during these very, very difficult times. But before we get into that, tell the listeners where you were born, where you came from, how you got to where you are today.
So I was born in Georgia. So you've got Georgia and Texas as my two combo. We are the quickest opening states in the known world. And I was born and raised in Columbus, Georgia. Went to college at Georgia Southern, graduate school at Emory. And then before I moved to Houston, I was in St. Simons Island, Georgia for about 6 years, which is, people may know Sea Island. They've heard of Sea Island, Georgia, which is basically the same region. But in the news recently was also Brunswick, Georgia, which was where the Ahmaud Arbery shooting happened.
Really?
And so so that neighborhood there, Satilla Shores, I've driven by that neighborhood a million times.
Boy, what a story that is.
Oh, yeah. Well, there's a lot of unity in the community. I'll just be all over the map. If that's okay. I didn't take my ADD drugs today, but there's a lot of unity in the community, actually, there. there's a lot of protests and things going on, but there's a lot of really positive unity between the African American community and the white community in Brunswick right now, which it should be. They should be unified around that. But met my wife at Georgia Southern University, and we got 2 daughters. One is 22 and is working as an intern at the church. Nepotism is always a great thing. And my 19-year-old is a freshman at the University of Oklahoma, which, UT guys don't like, but she loves it there. And of course, she came home for spring break and never went back, like a lot of kids this year did.
So you're married and you have 2 daughters, both of whom are out of high school. I was going to ask you because I've got 2 teenage boys and a girl who's 12 who we've all been together for 2 months. I was just going to ask you how the family's going, how the girl's doing.
All I can say is I got it way better than parents with younger children. I'm blessed.
Yeah.
I mean, I cannot imagine doing this with like young children.
Yeah,
I can't. I mean, you can't. Where do you go get away? What do you do? I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's
you can't escape
crazy.
them. You can't escape them, and so I that's a great point. And Vuk, my law partner, Vuk's got kids that are younger than my kids, and so my kids are teenagers, so they stay up late and they sleep late, and so my schedule has kind of changed to reflect their schedule. Vuk's getting up every morning at 7, and they've had school every day. I think they're done with school now, but you're right, particularly with younger kids. You know what else it does? I'll tell you, for me at least, it makes me appreciate what an incredibly difficult job teachers have and how much they do on a regular basis with these kids. Because now, people think homeschool, I'm going to homeschool my kids or something. That's a lot more work than maybe people realize.
What's it a mom said? She said, if you see me talking to myself, I'm just having a parent-teacher conference. And she's like hoping to get fired for day drinking while teaching at school. So I don't know that that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I mean, there was a meme of a car pulling up in front of the school and throwing the children out and throwing the backpack out. It's like first day back at school, after coronavirus is over.
Well, it's just the times are so strange. So John, I didn't realize this about your background, but when I'm not originally from Houston, but my wife grew up here and she's been a member at Chapelwood her entire life. Her parents have been members. And so when I moved to Houston, of course, I joined Chapelwood. And at the time, Jim Jackson was the head pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize there's a really cool story in your bio about how you got called both to be a minister and how you ended up at Chapelwood Methodist Church. So tell us about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so being in the ministry, I remember a pastor told me, if you think you can be happy doing anything else, do that. I always thought I was going to grow up and be a lawyer, and then God spared me from that by calling me into the ministry, is my running joke. But no, I mean, I grew up, and actually Jim Jackson, who's the pastor at Chapelwood, was my pastor when I was a teenager in Columbus, Georgia at St. Mark United Methodist Church. And so when I was called into the ministry at 18, I had really felt like that God had been working on me, calling me towards that path before then. And Jim was a real big mentor and an encourager. And so then when he was thinking about retiring, they did a nationwide search, and he was the one that said, hey, this kid at that time, I was, 44 years old when I came. I'm 50 now. But, he's like, hey, you ought to put this guy in the queue and let's take a look at this guy. So he's the one that got me on the list. He always likes to say, I got you on the list, but you got the job.
You got the job, yeah.
Which is what a good mentor is supposed to always say.
And Jim, big shoes to fill, like literally and practically. I mean, Jim, 6'6", big dude, really tall. I remember when I was getting married and right before I walked out to give the vows, and I'm 6'1", Jim came over and put his hands on my shoulders and said, I'm staring up, looking at him, and I know you're nervous. Don't worry, everything's going to be okay. But you came in, and there's a story you tell where I think it was when you were 17 or 18, and Jim was your pastor in Georgia, where you went up to the altar and he basically whispered something in your ear.
Yeah, he said God has called you to be a prophet or calling me to be a prophet. And in the sense of that, the way we believe it in our traditions, not a prophet like I'm going to be able to tell you your future,
Yeah.
but a prophet in the scripture in the Old and New Testaments is really it's not so much like guessing the future like Nostradamus. It's more one who declares the truth of God
Yeah.
to the people at the time that they need it. So that's what prophets did. They spoke the word of God and they told the truth of God to the kings and the nations, and to help them to hear the message they needed to hear about inequity or justice or what a repentance or whatever it was at that particular time.
And so was that comment, did that kind of set you on your path, or had you already been thinking about becoming a minister?
The path was already set. So like I said, I had wrestled with it for a long time, but like with any good, if you have a relationship with a mentor or someone, when they speak that word of affirmation, that's actually a really kind of a rite of passage for you, a rite of, of acceptance, and like, okay, what I'm hearing is not, off in left field. It's not something, it's real. It's affirmed by someone that you respect and that you look up to. I
Yeah.
think that was just, so when you look at the journey of any calling that you've been in or vocation, there's always this path along the way where you hear and sense certain things, but then there's always people who speak into that you admire, to help give you directions. Like I said, the pastor who told me, if you think you can do anything else and be happy, do that instead of being a pastor in ministry.
Yeah. Well, that's
which has
great.
proved to be true, because since I've been here, we've had oil go from $110 to 23 and 20, from 14 to 16. Then we had Harvey. Our denomination has been arguing for 40 years about homosexuality, so we've been dealing with that.
Yeah.
And then you've got now this thing. So my last 6 years here have been an amazing roller coaster ride of challenges to deal with. Yeah.
Well, and I definitely want to talk about all that stuff. One of the things that John didn't realize, so I grew up on, my dad was in the military, and so I grew up on military bases primarily. And on a military base, there were essentially three services. There was Jewish, Catholic, and Protestant. And we were Protestant, but there was no differentiation between Methodist and Baptist and stuff like that. So I got an opportunity to go see Southern Baptist gospel choirs that I probably would have never got a chance to see. I got a really neat chance to see a lot of different denominations. But one of the things I guess I didn't realize until probably, I'm 47 right now, probably until I was in my mid 30s, is how religious leaders like you, when you're younger, you just have this impression that there's a man or a woman up there preaching the word of God, and that's the leader. And a lot of people don't realize that you and your colleagues deal with very, very difficult situations pretty much on a daily basis. I mean, you're people that are sick, people that are dying, people that are having tragedies in their life. I mean, you're pastors like you are at the forefront of all that stuff. And so we're in some, obviously some really trying times right now. This pandemic is, none of us that are alive, I think, have ever been through anything like this. So the main reason I wanted to get you on the podcast today is to talk about spirituality and religion during difficult times. And I'm glad you brought up the fact that, in Houston, over the last 6 or 7 years, it's just been one thing after the other. I mean, the Houston economy has taken a hit. Hurricane Harvey, I want to talk specifically about how Harvey affected Houston and what Chapelwood did in response to that. And then, of course, the pandemic too. So one of the things, John, when Hurricane Harvey came through, you mobilized a huge group of volunteers at Chapelwood to try to respond to that. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and what that was like?
One of the things I think that it's important for a lot of people to know, when you're a pastor and you start out in a small church, you're like the only employee. So you're going to see everyone in the hospital, you're going to see everyone in their house, to visit people, to do all these things. When you get to the point where you start serving at a much larger church, there's a different skill set that's involved. And so in some ways you stop doing things that you did most of your ministry, but you start doing a whole new set of things. Because what most people don't realize is that, running a large church is like running a business. I mean, we have between, the church and our schools and everything, you're talking about a $16 million annual budget.
Wow.
And so you have an executive staff, and you have, a pastoral care staff. You have people that are focusing in all of these areas. What was interesting about Harvey was, like any church, you're organized to kind of operate the way you operate, right? So you know what you do. You do what you do, and you know what you do. And all of a sudden, this thing comes. And it started with a phone call from, actually, it started with a text message the night that it rained. I think Saturday night, we had church. We canceled church on Sunday morning. And it started raining Saturday night. And I think on Sunday evening, stuff started being released. You guys know all about all the reservoir releases and everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. I don't get into all that, right, wrong, or different, but I can tell you that someone said they were stuck down on Gessner. They couldn't get out of their house, and they had an elderly mother. And so it's like Sunday night. I think it was Sunday night. It was still raining. And somebody said, I just put out on Facebook, does anybody have a boat? That's just how it started. Yeah. And next thing you know, I got like everybody calling me, and so what happened immediately was just onslaught of guys who came with their duck boats and their bass boats and their whatever else that said, hey, we need to go save people. It wasn't an I wish I could say, when we look back and we think about all the hundreds of people that, the first night we did it, we had like 5 guys, and then the next night it was like 40 guys, and then the next night it was like, and we kept going until you couldn't get in the water again. But it was just interesting. It was just a need. It was like, what would you do? I mean, you don't know what you do unless you're in the spot.
Yeah.
And you just knew that someone needed, they had an elderly mother, and they needed to get out of the house, and they weren't sure if the water was coming in. And so what happened out of that is we just structured sort of a whole systematic process, sort of a phases. Phase 1 was just rescue people. And then we had our staff back at the church as soon as they could get on with certain people organized around, okay, phase 2 is going to be getting in people's houses and mucking, taking the sheetrock out and pulling out the insulation and all the kind of just the remediation kind of stuff to begin with. And then the phase 3 was going to be the rebuilding. And we knew then it was going to be a minimum 3-year process. And so what I was really proud about Chapelwood and the leadership there and the people is that, we made a commitment. Even still today, out of that whole process came something called the restoration team, which we're now in the process of spinning off as a separate 501c3. And they do construction with people who don't have the resources. They're still working on Harvey things. Hard to believe that they're still helping families that have been impacted by Harvey. But so a lot of the Red Cross grant money and everything we funneled into this restoration team. So it's just interesting how you look now at all the response that happened and all the things that came out of it. You would never have thought it just started because, there's just a need. We got to do something. We happen to be a large enough organization that once you started putting all the pieces together, just a lot of really good stuff got done. So, I've been really proud of the church and the response on that. The people who couldn't get out and help donated financially. But then you had a lot of people that were working, every day. For a while there, it was every day, and then it was every Saturday and Sunday, but it was a really neat thing to see. And then that kind of set us up in some ways to be ready for this.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. And for people that didn't live through the flood in Houston, this was a flood, not to tell a pun or something, but truly a flood of biblical proportions. When you talk about you're literally having to take boats down residential streets to people with 6 and 7 feet of water in the house just to get them out of the house. And this was going on all over the place in Houston. And then afterwards, of course, their houses are totally destroyed. So you got to muck them out and stuff. And John, talk a little bit about, because I think sometimes we forget about the value of the home. Like your home, when your home is destroyed and all the memories and all the stuff you got in there, and your home is kind of also, I think, gives you kind of a sense of security, a sense of place, a sense of grounding. And so that flood event was a lot more traumatic than just the loss of a piece of property for a lot of people. So talk a little bit about kind of what you experienced, the troubles that people were going through after they had lost their homes, and kind of what Chapelwood did to try to fill that need.
Well, you have to think in terms of, a person's home is a sanctuary space. It's a holy space. And the word holy simply means that it's set apart for a sacred purpose. It's consecrated for a sacred purpose. So a holy cup or a holy space, it's not holy for any other reason. That has been set apart for a sacred purpose. And so a church is set apart for a sacred purpose to lead worship, but your home is set apart for the sacred purpose of rearing your family, caring, providing a safe and nurturing environment for the parents and for the kids, so when the kid has a bad day at school, they can come home and go in their room, and you have these safe confines. You also have all of these mementos, like this cross that's hanging behind me, is made out of an old barn in South Georgia from, the place where I moved from. And so it's just all pieces. These are things that have meaning, that carry meaning, and you can't underestimate the importance for our own psychological makeup, mental well-being, than these markers. So there's these things, and sometimes it's like, I just look around in my office and there's pictures and there's all sorts of things that, wouldn't mean a hill of beans to you. You wouldn't, but if we were to lose that, it's you think about pictures, and you and I are, I'm 50. So when I go back to wedding pictures, it's not all on digital. Probably should get it done that way. But, and so think about older families that went through this and lost, they didn't transfer all that stuff digitally, home movies and just things you value, but it disrupts the psyche. This is why you see a lot of post-traumatic stress out of things like going through a flood. I remember they call it, I can't remember the psychological term for it, but the way it looks and it manifests is like that night that the reservoirs, I think it was that next day, like Monday and Tuesday, they were releasing the reservoirs, and you were hearing these rumors of, oh my gosh, homes are being flooded now that have never been flooded before. And my street floods, but my house is never flooded. And I remember that night, every like 30 minutes or an hour, I'd wake up and like look at the floor.
Yeah.
Not that my house is in danger of being flooded, but there's this psychological terror of that it's going to happen to you. And we had an entire city that was going through that for multiple days. And then people who actually had lost their homes or had to be taken out on a boat. We saw couples, you talk about distress. There were older couples that didn't want to leave their houses. They had 6 feet of water downstairs. And they were upstairs, and we were, tossing water bottles to them, and they didn't want to leave their house. Because they thought, oh, it's going to, the flood will go away. It'll go away soon. It always goes away. Well, it always used to go away until the reservoir thing. Because they just keep pumping the water in. So it's not like the flash flooding that can just go away. So it was a very traumatic, I think, thing for a lot of people that went through that. And rightly so.
Part of the reason, I remember, I got very, very fortunate. I live in a part of Houston that was essentially ground zero. And we were very lucky because the water came all the way up to the driveway, but didn't quite get in the house. But 2 blocks south of me, there were people that was 6 feet of water in their house. And so one of the reasons I remember this, when you're sitting there, and if you live in Houston, you're familiar with flash floods and stuff like that. And one of the problems with it is you have a feeling of kind of helplessness. Like there's only so much, you can only put so many bags of sand up. If the water is coming in, the water's coming in. And there's really, there's a lack of feeling of control, which I think maybe causes people to have more anxiety about these things than if they felt like they had some control over it. So that's kind of a good segue to what we're dealing with now, John, which, I don't know what you think about this situation, but to me at least, it's just so big that it's hard to get your head around all of the different whether it's the science behind the disease and all the things we don't know about the disease, and or whether it's the economy and balancing, being able to get people to work, because as we all know, not making any money or losing your job, that can be just as devastating psychologically as anything else. And so tell us, how do you think about these kinds of situations that we find ourselves in right now, these situations where there's just so much uncertainty, anxiety, there's unknown, we don't have control over a lot of this stuff. How do you think about these kind of things, John?
This thing is very different in that, when you had Harvey, you had a huge resource of people that were not flooded, that could donate, that could come volunteer, that could come work. A lot of those guys that came on boats, they were guys that might come to church, once every 6 months or once a year, but man, there was the need and they wanted to respond, and they upped the game. But the problem with this is it impacts everyone. It doesn't matter where you live, close to a bayou, doesn't matter, everyone has to stay at home. Everyone has to be quarantined. I think the mental health issues that we're going to have coming out of this are going to be massive. I mean, you're seeing a lot of documentation on this. I mean, just the psychological kind of stuff that goes on from it's a little thing. I always try to boil it down, to synthesize it to something that's simple that you can taste, touch, feel, and smell. But I was at the golf course like a week ago, and the guy comes up to me, and he hadn't seen me in a long time, and he walks up and he puts his hand out, and I shake his hand and I go, oh crap, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I'm thinking, that is the first person's hand that I've shaken in 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And I had to stop for a minute and go, wow, that's a pretty significant thing that I never thought I'd have to think about. I mean, to be with people, we've had some folks to our house in the backyard to have dinner, but you're trying to figure out what's the right balance. But we're teleworking, at the church, everybody's working from home. We haven't had church services. You've never seen anything like that before.
How are you? I was going
to
ask you about that, because let's flag that real quick, John. You have 3 services on Sunday. You have services on Saturday. I think you even have services on Sunday night. There are thousands of people that come through Chapelwood every week that aren't coming through Chapelwood anymore. And, we see these stories about pastors opening up churches and just ignoring orders and stuff. And I think there's a tendency sometimes to maybe be a little quick to judge, but for a lot of people, church is a central part of their week. It's a central part of their identity, and not just reading the Bible or listening to sermons, but actually being there with people that you love and respect. And how are you dealing over the last 8 weeks with the fact that you can't actually bring people in to the physical building? How are you dealing with that?
Yeah, well, like all churches, I mean, it's a whole new world. So for us, we were already at a place with having online worship services. We've refined it now. In some ways, our online service is a lot better because we're learning how to create something, because that's our only audience. Before, your main audience is there, they're present, and people from home are just observing from a distance, right? They're observing the live service. Well, now we don't have anybody there, and the only audience are the people at home. So in some ways, you are changing what you do to create. I hate to use a term like this, but you're creating a product, not that it's transactional, but you want something that works while you're sitting at home with your family.
Yeah.
Which is a traditional service with people moving and taking a break or this. It doesn't flow the same way, it doesn't work the same way. So, there's many different ways to do it, from small churches to large churches. But the biggest thing is Zoom. I'm done with Zoom. Which no offense, we're on Zoom right now, but
Yeah.
I have digital screen fatigue, and we're finding that to be the case is people are ready to come back. Here's what's interesting. I always try to tell people to balance the difference between a churches and business. I'm a big fan of reopening safely. I'm a big fan of our economy reopening, people going back to work. I'm also a big fan of paying attention to science and doing it smart, right? We don't want this thing to surge again. The worst thing would be for us to all go back and it surges again and we have to shut down everything for another 8 weeks. That would, to me, that would be worse than slowly coming back in. Churches are very different, and they're different animals. And so when someone comes to me and says, well, hey, Walmart's open, why is the church not open? And I want to say, church is not Walmart.
Yeah.
You know, we are a place where we have a lot of what the way Dr. Mark Boom at Houston Methodist refers to it. You have a crisscrossing at a large venue. And what he means by that is you have a lot of people that are coming into a space and they're crossing between each other. They're walking down aisles together. They're going through doorways together. They're passing each other in the hallway. So you have a lot of, it's really hard to socially distance. Well, if you can't socially distance, then you have to wear a mask, or at least you should, right? That's encouraged.
Right.
The mask is when you can't get the 6 feet of social distancing. So you're going to have a lot of situations. Well, then when we tell people, okay, you're going to come to church, you're going to have to wear a mask. You have to socially distance. You have to sit separated. You have to skip every other row. We're not going to be able to sing.
You're going to have to bring, probably service. You're going to have to bring your own Bible. You're not going to be pulling the hymn books out.
No hymnals,
like
no hymnals. Yeah. Everything's on the screen. You know, we hold the door for you. You sanitize. You can come in, you sit, you leave. We have to have extra time between to fumigate the whatever the cleaning stuff that you have to do. So you start asking people, it's like, or like we can't have nursery, can't have childcare. You're not going to have children's Sunday school. You kids have to sit. I had a young guy asked me, he's got young kids, and he said, well, when are we coming back to church? I can't wait to get back to church. So I'm like, all right, we're not going to have a nursery. He's like, oh, I'm going to wait till you have a nursery. And I'm like, I don't blame you. Yeah. I mean, of course you're going to wait. But here, the other side of the spectrum is, okay, now if you're a young family, you're not really going to want to come with your kids. You can't contain them. They're going to get into someone else's space. But churches are also made up of a larger number of people who are in these vulnerable populations.
Yeah.
So people who are over 60 or over 65. The people who are missing the connection the most that we find are 75 and 80 and 85-year-old widows and widowers who are living alone in their home. They're not able to connect with their families because of the distancing. And they want to be back at church. They want to be back with their friends. They want to be in their Sunday school class. Well, the thing is, okay, even if we open up and you come back, you can't be together in that way.
Yeah.
You know, we can't do that just out of safety and love for them. And the first rule of Methodism, the first general rule of Methodism is do no harm. And that's the same as medicine.
Yeah.
So we have to prepare a situation to say, okay, we will come back when we can have a good worship service. We'll come back when we can make sure that we have all the protocols for people to be as safe as possible. Because as Mark Boom and David Callender, who's the head of Memorial Hermann, when the calls that I've been on with them, they said, look, when you open up, someone is going to come to church and have COVID-19.
Yeah.
Just the percentages, if you have 1,000 people coming through that weekend, somebody's going to have maybe more than one. So you have to make sure you have everything in place, the protocols to where you can prevent that spread. There was a church in North Georgia that opened up 2 weeks ago, masked, social distance, small church, and 3 people got coronavirus. Now they were separated and masked, but again, how do you police? If someone shows up at church and they're 85 I'm not going to say to them, I'm sorry, I can't let you come in.
Right.
We don't do that.
Well, and you just brought up a really good point that I think bears talking about a little bit more. So, you're talking about people that are elderly, people in their 60s, 70s, 80s, especially widowers. So my mother's sister died of COVID-19 on May 11th, which was 37 years to the day after my mother died. Yeah. And she had been unhealthy for a while, so my grandmother, my mom's mom, is in a nursing home in Philadelphia. She's 97. She's still in good health. But so my mom has another sister and another brother who are still alive, and figuring out you're not allowed to go into the nursing home, obviously, for safety reasons. You're not allowed to have a funeral, obviously, for safety reasons. And so watching how my family, half my family's from the Philly area, watching how they've, first of all, broke the news to my grandmother, which it's not a situation where you can, like you would normally do, you'd give them a hug and you'd cry on each other's shoulders and stuff. You got to basically do it through a window. And then setting up a
Yeah.
funeral that's all digital. And I mean, and so what do you tell, what would be your advice to people about, especially with the more vulnerable parts of our population, the older people, the people, I think of my dad who's 76 and he hadn't seen his grandkids in 2 months.
Yeah.
What do you tell, how can we, as spiritual people, as leaders in the community, how can we help the most vulnerable people in our community?
Well, you have to, I think the maintaining the connection, the good old fashioned pick up the phone and call people.
Yeah.
My grandmother I remember my grandmother was on a phone tree back in the day from her Sunday school class. And, the thing now is, you and I are kind of this transition, but the generations that are younger than we are, they text, they email, unless you're in some sort of a sales business, people don't pick the phone up and just have conversation with people.
That's right.
And so what we've learned is that when people go through a trauma of a loss, yeah, you may not be able to have a funeral service. That's one of the things we're trying to get back to turn on as quickly as possible before worship services is how do we do funerals? Because there's a real important need there for people to be able to gather and grieve and mourn the loss of someone. But even if you have to put it off, what we've learned, and I tell people is you still got to have a gathering by Zoom, by going in the backyard and 6-foot distancing, whatever it is, where you tell the stories and you recount the narratives. This is what we typically do when someone dies. Typically, a pastor will go to the house or they'll come to the office, and we gather around the family, in the room, and we're planning the service, yes, but the planning of the service. It's not just tactical and logistical. There's an hour or an hour and a half of sharing stories and people expressing their emotions. It's a very healthy process in the grieving stages is to be able to be in that place and sort of feel the weight of the next step. And when you take that away from people, it's not a natural thing that we do. Because when you lose someone, you have there's this natural, we don't just do funerals or have remembrances or memorial services just because someone liked the idea one day.
Right.
There's a spiritual, mental, and psychological reason why it happens. And it helps the stages of grief as you sort of move toward this point where now we're gathered together. Now we're telling the stories. Now we're planning. Now the day the service comes, there's some sense of finality and passing a threshold, not only for the person who passed away, but for those of us too.
You get a sense of closure.
Spiritual aspect.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of closure in being in that room in a holy space, wherever that space may be. Some people do it outside. Some people do it at a funeral home, but still there's some sacred gathering where there are words, there are scriptures, there's remembrances, there's songs, they sing dad's favorite song or whatever it is. Together. And then, and then they used to, have a reception or you go over to someone's house and all these people can come and greet you and hug you and share their remembrances. And we're missing that. And I don't know when that aspect returns, to be honest with you. Like we'll be able to do a funeral, but I'm not necessarily clear at this moment we'd be able to do a reception.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's interesting, John, how much of a priority you put on funerals. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but you're right. And one of the things as I'm picturing in my mind a funeral where people are actually together is there's going to be, just like you said, when your buddy shook your hand for the first time in 8 weeks. When you're at a funeral and you're with loved ones, there's a overwhelming desire, I think, to hug and touch and be close to each other and have that human connection. And right now, at least, you got to be a little bit careful about that, I think. So when you're talking about funerals,
doesn't cut it.
Yeah. So how would you? So have you been? Because one of your jobs, and I'm sure you don't do it as much anymore, but is presiding over funerals. And so what are you seeing right now? Are they having actual modified funeral services?
We've just started doing some outside in the courtyard. We had one last week. A lot of families are waiting to schedule something, but again, you're dislocating from the time and the grief, so it's hard for people to process that. I mean, you can imagine if you had your aunt that died on May 4th and you're not going to have a service until July. Up north, they might be somewhat familiar with that.
Yeah.
But at least they would have a memorial service before they'd have a burial if the ground would freeze. But for us, one of the things we saw in Albany, Georgia, which has one of the biggest outbreaks, had 85,000 people, and they had,
Wow.
they had more cases early on than Houston did
Wow.
because of a funeral.
Yeah.
Early on, the family insisted on gathering together at a funeral, went and had a reception. It got passed by all of these people. And so, I would say for people, make sure you don't drop the ball. Don't dismiss some sort of a retelling. I call it sort of a gathering. If it's by virtual, if it's by Zoom, but do it. Get all the family on all the panels of the Zoom and just share. Zoom is harder than a room filled with people because what Zoom doesn't allow you to do is have side conversation. So if you and I are having a conversation on Zoom, no one else can really have side conversations.
Right.
Whereas when you're in a room with 50 people, there's all kinds of conversations and you weave back in and back and forth. Zoom doesn't allow you to do that. So it's a whole different, more antiseptic way. But in that process where you can share, people can go around and take turns. Let me tell you what I remember about Uncle Jimmy. Let me tell you how he meant to me in my life.
Yeah.
That's still a very important and necessary thing that's needed, even if there's not going to be a service. So that's what we're encouraging people. And, it takes a little extra follow-up when someone's had a loss. Now they're not running into people all the time. They're not seeing their friends at church talking to them. So it takes some extra phone calls. Friends need to call more than they normally would to follow up with people. It's easy for us to get busy with work or whatever and lose sight of that. But it's just, might they call them every day for a couple of days and then skip a couple of days, but call them back and just to let them know you're thinking about them, because they're missing out on those natural opportunities where they're going to be around so many people and they'd have the chance to share things that are on their heart. They don't have that opportunity now. That's why getting back to doing funerals is a high priority, because if you think about all the things that we do as a church, having church on Sunday morning is important, but as far as spiritual wholeness and well-being in a person's life, that passage, that from life to death to life again for us is huge. There's a massive sense of healing that takes place in the spirit.
Absolutely.
When you're able to usher people in to eternity in a healthy and positive and productive way that reminds people of the life that comes after this life. And so, that's important for me. For us now, we, our regathering, we calling it a regathering task force, not reopening, because we never really closed.
Yeah.
I
like the way you put that, regathering. I like that. That's good.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing that's different between a church and a Walmart. Walmart closed.
Yeah.
The church, we've never closed. I mean, we've been, Matt Russell, one of our executive pastors, a week or two ago was down at city council with a bunch of other agencies trying to petition to get more rent relief with the money that came from the federal government. And you may have seen in the news some of that money, $15 million was gone in, 60 minutes or whatever.
That's right. Yeah.
Baker Ripley put out. So there's not enough. I mean, you need $100 to $200 million to help with rent relief. And now the Supreme Court has lifted the eviction moratorium. And so, we are potentially in a place now in Houston where you could see massive evictions of families that don't have anywhere to go. That worries me. The food, Houston Food Bank is great, and we've been serving people all over, but now the housing could be a really big difficulty for us in Houston and in a lot of places.
Yeah, I worry about that a lot too, John. And so if you bookend the funeral, the first part for most people, that at least people that are of the Christian faith, is the baptism. And I would assume that baptisms are kind of similar right now. You can't do them the way you used to do them, or if you can do them at all.
Yeah, we could do small gatherings right now. We're not far away from being able to look at funerals, potentially weddings. Once we figure out the seating capacity that we can use, and this based on our seating. But I mean, we have a sanctuary that can seat 1,200-1,300 people, but our maximum capacity early on maybe like 244, 250 people. We've had people that rescheduled weddings from March, that have moved into July or September. And so now they're getting nervous and saying, hey, in July, are we going to be able to meet? And I'm saying, yeah, we're going to be able to meet, but you're not going to be able to have 400 or 500 people there.
Yeah. And, I went out to eat, John, for the first time last week with my wife to a restaurant, and it was 25%. They were complying with Governor Abbott's rules, and all the waiters had masks on, and we were actually eating outside. Yeah. And I'd forgotten, frankly, how much I enjoyed being around other people, and because I'm a little bit of a
how much better the wine tastes when you get it at the restaurant versus if you buy it.
Exactly. And
yeah, exactly.
So I was thinking about this, and you have a master's in divinity and a doctor of ministry. So you've forgotten more about theology than I'll ever know, but it seems to me there is a kind of a tradition across most of the major religions of like when Jesus went away for 40 days, or when Muhammad went into the wilderness, there's this tradition of isolation and solitude. And we've all kind of had that forced upon us over the last 2 months. And I'm curious what you would tell people about spiritually, psychologically, emotionally, what recommendations you would have about dealing with this solitude that's been forced upon us. Like, what would you recommend people do to try to get through these types of really trying times?
Yeah. So see, here's the fine line. So there's the ancient Christian monastics, the Desert Fathers and Mothers, went out into the desert to live life on their own. They did that by choice.
There you go. Yeah, that's right.
The other side of that, mandated isolation, is what John McCain had to deal with during the Vietnam War. I mean, This is what we talk about. There would be, I'm sure, lawyers and a lot of ethicists that would argue that solitary in prison is cruel and unusual punishment.
It's torture.
Yeah. Because we're not created to live in isolation. So when you go back in both the Judeo-Christian and even, Islamic history, and look back at Genesis and the creation, it's like, what does God say? It's not good for man to be alone. Yeah. You need community, and we're created for community. And so this whole quarantine isolation, we can get through it a little bit better if we have a family at home. But imagine all the people who are at home by themselves. My mother's been one of those in Georgia. And so
she's essentially in solitary confinement, right? I mean, she's in solitary confinement.
Yeah. She goes out to pick up her groceries, or she goes out to pick up her, the liquor store run, all the key and essential ingredients. I mean, and she's just discovered, Zoom happy hour with her girlfriends. I mean, so now this has brought her this new joy.
Yeah.
But I think that, what I tell people is what we want to do in our society is we don't like silence, and we don't like to be alone, because it forces us to confront some demons or some insufficiency in ourselves. Yeah. So typically what our Western American society creates for us is, as soon as I get to a place of where I'm like, yeah, that's a nerve I don't want to touch. I don't want to go there. That's too painful. That's too whatever, or that's going to make me have to deal too much with the monsters inside of me. So what do? We got so much stuff to turn our attention. We can go out to eat. We can go shopping. We can order off Amazon. We can go play golf. We can go out with our friends. When you turn that off, and now people are starting to sit and deal with fears and insecurities and all these things, and they hit that spot, there's not a place to run to. There's not a place to project it onto anymore. So that's going to lead people in like really a couple of directions, but one of two. It could be a very healthy place where you can deal with it in a healthy way and say, all right, let me learn something about this. And God, what can you teach me, as I sit in this, and what resources can I pull from to now deal with this, maybe this wound or this difficulty that I've tried to sweep under the rug most of my life, the whole skeleton in the closet that I've ignored. Or the other alternative is you depression and desperation and fear or loathing or just mental health anguish because you've hit a spot now, and instead of trying to deal with it in a healthy way and to find the help that you need to get to it, you're backed into a corner like a wounded animal, and that's going to put that puts us in a really, really bad spot. So I think our culture, our consumeristic sort of glittery culture with everything going on, there's a lot I love about it, but there's a lot that can distract you from dealing with your own crap.
Yeah.
That's a nice theological way to put it. We're not dealing with our own crap.
I guess so maybe one way to put it would be that you can use this forced solitude to go in one of two directions, either in a direction that's going to lead you towards depression and anxiety and maybe some things that you don't want, or you can use it to strengthen your faith, to strengthen your, like the way you think about things. And so, John, one of the things I've always admired about you that I'm very, very, very bad at, I'm trying as hard as I can to get better at it, but on social media, if you're on social media right now, you would think that half of Americans hate the other half of Americans, and the other half hate the other half, and we're never going to get along, and things are terrible, and there's all this negativity.
Mm-hmm.
But you've always been so positive on social media, whether it be Facebook or the other websites. Can you talk a little bit about how is it with all the negativity and the anxiety and the yelling and the fussing? How do you maintain kind of an optimistic, positive presence out there in the world, and in particular on social media?
Well, I always say it's like Facebook, Twitter is just where the devil lives, I think.
I think you're right about that.
It's someone said something wise, and I don't even remember who it was, but what social media has done for us is it has created a society where everyone's opinion has to be shared.
Yeah.
And it's like, I have a thought about something, I have to share it. And it's almost like we live in a society that feels like it has to disagree with each other. You could put the most innocuous statement on Facebook, like, man, I'm so proud of the state of Texas, and you're going to get somebody goes, oh yeah, well, let me tell you what Texas did.
That governor is an idiot.
Well, I'm not even talking about the governor, I'm just talking about anything. It's just like, it doesn't matter. You could say, look at this little beautiful baby that was just born, we celebrate, and somebody will say, oh, you swaddled it wrong.
Yeah.
You get supposed to go clockwise.
Right.
This the best example I can tell you is like, I don't know if you watched this show with John Krasinski on YouTube, but if Some Good News, have you seen that?
Yeah, I have seen that. Yeah. Uh-huh.
All right. Yeah. You got to get your kids to watch. It's great. And he's really positive, but at the beginning he spins the globe and everybody tweets, you're spinning the globe the wrong way. Like, I didn't know there was a right way for the globe to be spun, but apparently there was.
Yeah.
But I think there's something, when your anxiety is evidence of spiritual insecurity and spiritual immaturity. And I think when you're creating anxiety in relationships, I usually am nicer to people when I say it to them. It's also a real lack of humility. And I think that spirituality should bring up in you that if you are moving in the right direction spiritually, you'll be growing in your humility. And there is a sense in our culture that humility is countercultural. Right now, it's like everyone has to be so confident that their view is right.
Yeah.
Everyone has all this certainty, even if it's unfounded. And you can't win an argument on social media. You cannot win an
I
argument. This is the
just
thing you
now
have to start
realized
with.
that, John. I've been trying to win
You
arguments for
cannot.
5 years.
No,
I
no,
just
you
now
cannot.
realized
It's
you can't.
impossible.
And guess what I
No, I see.
realized
You
too?
should have asked me a long time ago.
If
I
you
would
get
have
on
told you
Facebook
cannot win.
and tell people they're idiots, you're not going to convince them of anything. And I just started to realize that.
But not even that. Let's say you pull the greatest scientific paper on coronavirus written by the leading expert of the world, Dr. Anthony Fauci,
Yeah.
and you put it out there. And guess how many people think Anthony Fauci, Dr. Fauci's a fool now?
Yeah.
They didn't think that a month ago, but now there's it's like, okay. And people who have no, lay people, it's always amazing to me people have such strong opinions on things that they don't really know anything about.
Yeah.
So I remember that, in James, it says you're supposed to be quick to listen, slow to speak. I mean, quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And the problem is we don't listen enough in our society, and we don't have enough humility in our society to think we could be wrong. So when I look at this, this issue of what's going on now with this, we have lost the ability to think of the world in terms of both and. We only view the world in terms of either or. And that, again, I think is a spiritually immature way to view the world. I think it's just not spiritually and psychologically, it's not healthy for you.
Right.
Because look at this right now. So some people say, I'm not wearing a mask. You can't make me wear a mask. Okay. And other people said, you have to wear a mask. Some people said we should open tomorrow, the church. Some people say, let's don't open. Well, both these views are founded on things that are not so far off the spectrum of reality.
That's right.
There are some people that look at the stats and say, look, coronavirus it's flattened. It's not as bad as we thought or whatever. And there's some value in that. There's some truth in that. But then on the other side, it's dangerous. It's contagious. And, one of the things about religion, whether it's in the Jewish faith or the Christian faith, even the Islamic faith, the three major ones, is we all have this principle that no life is, that no life is worth sacrificing over some principle of worship or whatever. Every life is valuable. So if the society says, well, we believe there's going to be, we've gone from 80,000 to 134,000, but that's a price we're willing to pay to get the economy rolling again. All right. Well, I don't like the way it's framed, but at the same time, it's also right that if you don't get the economy rolling again, just like we said, you've got people that are not getting health care. The biggest thing that we're finding at Texas Medical Center of the secondary aspects is that people are not going to the doctor. People who have health issues, heart attacks, diabetes, whatever, or they're having issues that normally they would go to the doctor to get checked out. Now they're not going to the doctor because they're afraid they might get coronavirus.
They're afraid they're going to get infected in the hospital.
So my argument is, why does it have to be only one or the other side? There's truth across the spectrum, and yet the where you get into trouble is when someone is on one side and their side is the only way it can be seen. Their way is the only right way.
Right.
I mean, it's just common decency. If someone wants to wear a mask into the grocery store because they want to protect someone else, why would you haze that person?
Yeah.
And if you don't want to wear a mask in a store that says they want you to wear a mask, don't go shop there.
Yeah.
Go somewhere else. You don't have to but that's just me. It's more common sense and kindness. I think, in the Christian faith, kindness and gentleness and self-control, again, lead to humility, are the things that are countercultural and what we need more. We need a little bit more nuance. We are in an unnuanced age, and it's hyper partisan. And I'm convinced as well that the media every media channel is has got some catechism that they want you to follow. I try to watch them all a little bit.
Yeah.
And I land on some more than others. But, if you're listening to Fox all the time, I can tell when I meet someone this person listens to Fox News.
Yeah.
And I can tell when someone else, I could go, this person listens to MSNBC.
Yeah.
And I could tell just by talking to them about these issues, you kind of know what their media tribe is, right?
Yeah, exactly. Although I'll give you one exception to that. I was talking to my dad last night, and I said, because I told my dad, I said, the first thing I do when I check the news, I check the Drudge Report and I check Huffington Post. And I figure something in the middle is probably about right. I said, where do you get your news, Dad? He goes, well, he kind of grumbled. Well, I got this Yahoo deal, and it just gives me MSNBC every morning, and it just gets my blood pressure going. So my dad actually reads the other side because he can't figure out how to reprogram his browser to show him Fox News. But one of the things that I strongly believe, I of course could be wrong about this, but as a lawyer, sometimes we can't do this now, but we used to have groups of people into the office and do focus groups. And we try to get the most diverse group of people we could possibly get: old, young, black, white, Hispanic, conservative, liberal, you name it. And I'll tell you what, John, everybody gets along. And, we watch these people deliberate about very important issues in person, and almost everybody, that they're not arguing about politics. They're not fighting with each other. People generally get along. And so what I believe is a lot of this, what you're talking about with the news and a lot of the social media, it's fake outrage. Like, people really aren't that mad at each other when you get down to it. It kind of creates a layer of outrage. It's not really there. Like, when you're in person with people, you're not going to be saying the kinds of things, not you, John, but me and other people. You don't say the same things in person that you would say on social media. It's almost like you have a license to be a jerk on social media sometimes. And I'm as guilty of that as anybody. Like I said, I've been working on that a lot. And frankly, I like watching what you post, because when I see what you post, I'm like, that's how you do it. That's how you post. That's how you act like a leader. That's how you become a positive influence in the community. In other words, I don't see you up there bickering with other Methodist preachers about homosexuality in the Methodist Church. I'm not seeing any of that on social media. I'm guessing most of those tough issues you're probably dealing with in person.
Oh, yeah. I think you should always deal with difficult issues in person or on the phone. I don't think you deal with it in email or text messages. Whenever someone's mad at me and they send me an email, my first offer is, let's get together. Of course, it used to be before staying home was, let's set up a time and have a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. Let's have a cup of coffee face to face, because people are much more, they tend to be more sensible, and they're listening. You can't, email's the worst.
Yeah.
To try to deal with the difficult issues. And I counsel my staff all the time, do not deal with difficult issues by email or social media. And I don't know why, that's the worst way to deal with it. And yet that's the way most people want to argue, is on social media.
Right.
And, I've learned though that some people just enjoy it.
They do.
It's fun for them.
Yeah.
To piss people off. I mean, it's like, I've learned, I guess, in 30 years of being in ministries, that some people are just not happy unless they're unhappy.
Complaining about
that's just the way they are.
John, let me ask
God
you.
bless them. If that's what I'm not going to be a part of it. I just no, thank you.
Yeah. Let me ask you, because I had what I think was something of a realization a number of years ago. And that was, I finally realized that it wasn't all about me. Like, life wasn't about what I could get, what I could do for myself. I started thinking, life is really more about what you do for other people. And so one of the things that I found is, when I do something nice for people, and I'm not even in your ballpark, I'm not even the same universe as you, but I find that when I do things nice for people, it makes me feel a lot better. And so, would you recommend, especially during these kind of times, one of the ways I think to be spiritually and psychologically healthy is to try to find ways to help people. What are your thoughts on that, John?
Yeah, I think helping people. I think if you're in a position where you financially can be helpful to some of these families or some of these situations or some of these organizations, I think that's a significant thing. I think they teach you in Lent We fast, we give things up, but we also engage in what's called almsgiving. So you're supposed to give more to the poor during those seasons of when it's difficult. And so, some people are really struggling. Some people are doing okay. They're working from home, and, we're blessed not to have the same hit. So that's when you go, okay, I'm in a place where I can do something. So I think giving financially is important. I think also going and serve. We have like ways you can sign up and just come. We train you to put on the mask and hand out food to the people that are driving through the food pantry. You can do that with us, and there's untold numbers of other memorial, area ministries, assistance ministries here. MAM up on Bingle, they have volunteer spaces now, because they used to have a lot of volunteers that were older adults and they can't volunteer now. So I think when you get out of your space, take your kids, take your kids to the food pantry and give out food with them, or to the thrift store, or do some volunteering with your family and let the kids see you doing it and you doing it. It really does. It's a powerful weapon that goes against the negativity and some of the ways that we can get into the depression of this thing. And journaling is also a good activity. And I think I've heard someone say, write letters to people that you haven't seen in a long time, and pick up the phone and call people that you haven't talked to in years and years and years from your past. This is a good opportunity to just catch up.
Yeah.
And those are joyful reunion type moments where you can, I've got some, I haven't done it yet, but I've got on my list to call like some people from high school that I haven't talked to in,
nice.
Since 1988 or something like that. But I mean, it just be a neat, and it gets you out of your own, what's the term they use for it? We have this, there needs to be sacrifice that comes. It's a countercultural thing, because what happens is our self-idolatry gets really exposed. Everything's about us. Everything's about mine and me. But the church models something more, where you put in other people's interest above yourself. And when you do that, that's the paradox that gets you thinking less about yourself and what you've lost and what you need and what you're not getting. And you become a much more empathetic human being, which is not a bad thing.
It's remarkable. It's absolutely remarkable how helping other people helps you, and how if all you're thinking about revolves around you tend to get more anxious, more depressed, more upset, where when you're thinking about what you can do for other people, it tends to have the opposite effect. It's just, to me, it's almost a miracle that it works that way. So you mentioned signing up for the food bank. Where would people go if they wanted to sign up for that?
Well, our site, pretty much our entire website at chapelwood.org is, just pulling that up now. I mean, the whole thing, there's a button that says stay connected. So if you go to chapelwood.org, you can check out about what's going on. But the very first button there is stay connected. And when you go to that site, there's all sorts of the things that we're doing that are online, whether watching the videos, but the center buttons are, do you need help? Would you like to help others? Would you like to give a donation? Or deliver hot. You can also donate hot meals. They're cooking hot meals at the church that we take to families. But if you go on the Help Others tab, there are actually ways that you can sign up to volunteer at the Fairhaven Food Pantry, and it gives you instructions on the social distancing guidelines. But I encourage. We've been doing more. I'm hoping that I'm hoping to see that traffic flow slow down, because that means people are going back to work.
Right.
And it's not so needed so much, but it's still going. And if you click, it pulls up what's called the Service U sign up sheet. And there's slots today.
Nice.
There were slots today. And so every day of the week you can go and it'll tell you if all the slots are filled. But on Tuesday, there's slots where you can sort and box produce and food. So I think a lot of families have been doing this together with their kids. It's been really neat the times that I've gone and seen teenage kids. Your kids could go and, you could go with them in the afternoon or in the morning and, do 2 hours and get them to see it. It gives you something to talk about and think about together.
Yeah, for sure. And, the other thing, John, is, and I could be wrong about this too, but I think sometimes the news focuses on a lot of the negative, and there's a lot of positivity going on. There are a lot of people helping a lot of other people right now. We are coming together as a country privately in many ways, big and small, that maybe don't get quite the publicity that they need. But anyway, John, we've been going longer than I anticipated, and I know you're a super busy guy, so I really, really, really appreciate your time. Before I let you go, though,
Sure.
I got a guy with 3 different degrees in divinity and ministry and various things. So leave us, if you don't mind, with a couple spiritual or other thoughts for people that are kind of looking for something to hold on to during these difficult times. Leave us with either a Bible verse or a way of thinking about this that might help people as we go through this.
All right. Well, I'll give you 2 real quick. So I'm just pulling up here, working for my sermon this week, which is going to be on Hannah, who, for people that may not know, it was Samuel's mother, but she starts out, she's barren, but her husband, Elkanah, loves her, but his other wife can't stand her. And the Bible has all this kind of drama. It's better than like General Hospital soap opera. But anyway, she's in this temple area praying, and of course Eli, the priest, thinks she's drunk, and she's in pain. She's alone. She's alone, and she's in pain. She even says, my heart is deeply troubled. I'm pouring out my soul. I feel like a worthless woman. I'm filled with anxiety and vexation all the time. And I think, wow, that kind of speaks to where a lot of people feel themselves to be, is empty. Hannah was empty. She was barren. She felt worthless. And I'm thinking, wow, in this time now, a lot of us are in this waiting. We're not able to do the things we typically think. And so it digs us down into deeper stuff. And we're really wondering. And the 2 things that stand out to me just real quick is waiting is actually a very key spiritual practice, but you got to do it actively. And sometimes I think we wait passively, and this stay-at-home stuff, I think a lot of us have been, I'm guilty of it too, a little too passive, just kind of waiting for it to be done.
Yeah.
And we're missing out on some real good opportunities to grow in ways that we might not have if we weren't careful. But when you read the Psalms and everything else, there's a lot about waiting for the Lord, and it's done very much from an active component. So like with some of the things we talked about before, just engaging in some spiritual practices, I think will help make the waiting worthwhile. And the other last thing is, I think, spirituality in Christianity and Judaism, in Islam, there is a teaching, but deeply rooted in Christianity, is that the only way that you're going to get to a place of fullness is when you begin with emptiness. You've got to empty yourself in order to become full. You've got to give away in order to receive. You talked about the serving and the giving. This is a paradox of spirituality that a lot of people really, in our society, we never understand, because we're so centered. We basically are the center of our universe, and everything orbits around us.
Yeah.
Well, discipleship from a Christian perspective is trying to allow God to be the center around which everything orbits.
Yeah.
And so we have to give a lot of things up, but emptiness is required. It's necessary if you want to be full at some point. So I think those are the 2 things I would encourage for people is, be active in your waiting, and just recognize that you might feel like you're being emptied or you're empty in this season. That's not a bad thing, because sometimes you got to push some of that stuff out of the way so you can make room for something that's positive and life-giving.
John, that is awesome. And I think that is the perfect way to end this interview. And again, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate it. You've been a good friend of mine. You've helped me throughout the years in many ways that you probably didn't even know about. And so I know this podcast and your words is going to help a lot of people, and keep doing what you're doing, man. Like I said, I really, really appreciate it, and look forward to seeing you soon, man. Maybe on the golf course.
All right. It would be great. I'd love it. You take care. All right.
Thanks, John.
All right, buddy.
You've been listening to Lessons from Leaders with Brian Beckham. If you've enjoyed this week's interview, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and keep up with the latest episodes. You can also connect with Brian through his firm at vbattorneys.com.